Hi, I'm Parneen Jaggi, and we are going to be taking up a very interesting short story by Edgar Allan Poe, Some Words with a Mummy. As the title indicates, it has something to do with the mummy that we know were Egyptian mummies, the dead bodies that were preserved for a long, long time to be revived or taken out again after a long period. So, this is a different kind of a story, which is a satire as well as a suspense or a ghost story, also, it looks like. So, let's see what all is there in the short story. This is going to be an introductory video on what the story is about. So, Some Words with a Mummy is a satirical short story by Edgar Allan Poe, was first published in the American Review, a Whig journal of politics, literature, art, and science, in April 1845. The story is regarded as depicting the earliest known representation of a revived Egyptian mummy. So, what we know of its publication is that it was a different kind of a story because Edgar Allan Poe is also called the father of the genre of macabre or the ghost stories. And this story, it was when published in 1845, Columbian magazine listed this story, Some Words with a Mummy, as scheduled for publication. Poe likely pulled the article when he was offered more money for it elsewhere, but it was ultimately published in 1845 in the edition of American Review, which also included Poe's revised poems like The Valley of Unrest and The City in the Sea. The story was republished without any changes shortly after in November 1845 in the issue of the Broadway Journal. So now by this time when the story was published, we see that Edgar Allan Poe was also a poet and also had established himself as a short story writer and was also connected with a number of magazines and journals of his time. Now we look at briefly as to why this story is important and why do we read it even now. It is a significant story for featuring the earliest known image of a revived Egyptian mummy. In an 1852 anthology of Poe's works published in the UK, an illustration depicted a revived mummy. Poe and the illustrator challenged the accepted racial stereotypes and European imperialism. Now, we all know that mummies have always been objects of suspense and a kind of a riddle for the people of the world. So, when he wrote this topic, he wrote about this mummy, the revival of the mummy. He kind of challenged the acceptable and the popular views, the stereotyped images of the mummies, and even the European imperialism, which claimed many things that they knew. Because in this story, we see that the mummy actually refutes their claims, and the mummy challenges modern science and technology in different ways. Now, when we look at how popular this story could be, this is evident by the kind of adaptations it was taken into. This story was adapted as a one-act opera, Alla Mistake by Giulio Visio in 1954. Now, why Alla Mistake? Because when we read this story, we find that the name of the mummy before it died, the name of that person was Alla Mistake. Then, in 2004, the story was featured in Graphic Classics 10 Horror Classics, published by Eureka in an adaptation of Rod Lot with illustrations by Kevin Atkinson. Then again, in 2019, a theatre organ-based electro swing comic opera based on the story was debuted with music by Richard DeCosta. The book and the lyrics were written by Thomas Cleveland Lane. So, with a number of evidences that we see that the Some Words with the Mummy story was taken up as adaptation in operas and even in movies. And it was held in great esteem because it was a kind of a challenge to the British imperialism as well as the modern science. So we see that the word mummy, we know as a preserved dead body, um, is actually not presented in a very simple or plain light in this story. And it has been satirically portrayed with different kinds of twists and turns in the story, and we are going to take up the story in detail in the coming videos, so stay tuned. Thank you for now.